Wir haben Fabriken gefunden, allein eine da in Kramaroskaya zum Beispiel. Das war vor 2 Jahren ein Bau und wir hatten keine Ahnung. Heute ist dort eine Panzerfabrik, die in der ersten Schicht etwas über 30.000 und in den Vollausbau über 60.000 Arbeiter beschäftigt. Eine einzige Panzerfabrik. Wir haben sie besetzt. Eine gigantische Fabrik.
Very great danger, perhaps the gravest one. We ourselves were not completely sure of this, how monstrous this strong armament was.
Im Winterkrieg hätten wir das nicht gehabt. Natürlich hatten wir den Eindruck, dass sie gut gerüstet waren. Aber so wie sie in Wirklichkeit. Und jetzt ist gar kein Zweifel, was sie hatten in ihren Schild.
It is evident. They have the most monstrous armament that is humanly conceivable, so if anybody had told me that one state can line up with 35,000 tanks, I would have said, you have gone mad. 35,000 panzers. We have at the time more than 34,000 panzers destroyed. If somebody had told me this, if one general of mine had declared that a state here had 35,000 tanks, I would have said, Mister, you are seeing everything double or tenfold. This is crazy. You are seeing ghosts. I had not thought this possible. If somebody had told me that, I have told this just before, we have found industrial plants, for example, that were under construction 2 years ago, and we had no idea. And today there is a tank production facility that in full development, should have employed more than 60,000 workers. One single tank production facility. We have occupied it. A gargantuan facility. Lots of workers, who nevertheless live like animals and such.
Ja, 27 Jahre bijna. Freiheit gehabt haben, sich zu rüsten. Und alles ausgegeben für Rüstung. Nur Rüstung.
May I tell you, President of State, I have not suspected this. Had I suspected it, my heart would have felt even heavier. But I had made the decision all the more, because there was no other possibility. It was obvious to me, already in winter 39-40, that the invasion of the Soviet Union had to come. But I had the nightmarish pressure of the West on me, because a war on 2 fronts, that would have been the downfall. We too would have been crushed. We see that better today than we could realize it back then. We would have been crushed. Originally I wanted in autumn 1939 I wanted to carry out the West campaign. Only that continuous bad weather we had that has hindered us. Our whole armament it is a good weather armament. It is very capable, it is good, but it is unfortunately a good weather armament. Indeed, we have seen it recently here in this war. Naturally, all of our weapons are styled for the West. And we all had the conviction. That was until now. It was just our opinion. Since the oldest times, one cannot wage war in wintertime. And we have the German tanks. The German tanks have not been put to the test to perhaps prepare them for winter war. But test runs were made to prove that one cannot wage war in winter. It has been a different starting point. In autumn 1939, we have been facing the question, and I wanted yet to attack under all circumstances. I had the conviction that we would finish France within 6 weeks, but there was the question whether one would be able to move, and it was this continuously rainy weather. And since I know this French region very well, and I too could not discount the opinion of many of my generals that we probably would not achieve this verve, that we would not be able to make full use of the tank force, that we would not be able to make full use of the Air Force too, with the front airfields, because of the rain. I knew northern France myself. I have been a soldier for 4 years during the Great War, and that was the reason for this delay. Had I finished France in the year 39, the world history would have went a different way. But this way I had to wait until the year 1940, and that was not possible until May. The 10th of May was the first fair day, and I have attacked on the 10th of May at once. I gave an order on 8th of May to attack on the 10th, and then there had to be this giant transposition of our divisions from the west to the east to be made. Then we had this task in Norway during the same time. I can say that today, this very great misfortune upon us, namely the weaknesses that had arisen from Italy, firstly the North African situation, secondly with the situation in Albania and Greece, a very grave misfortune. We had to help. That, at a blow, meant for us first of all again a rending of our air force, a rending of our tank units. While we're preparing our tank units for the east, we had, at a blow, to commit 2 divisions, 2 complete divisions. It turned out to be 3 at the end, and had to replenish very great losses. There were bloody fights that have been fought out in the desert. Naturally, all of this has been missing here in the east, and it was not imaginable any other way that the decision, which has been inevitable. I had a talk back then with Molotov, and it was absolutely obvious. Molotov left with the decision to begin the war, and I dismissed him with the decision to beat him to it, if possible. Because the demands this man was making were obviously aiming at ultimately ruling Europe. Already in autumn 1940, there was constantly this question for us: shall one risk a sundering? I have advised the Finnish government back then to negotiate and to gain time to handle things, diverterish. I have to admit that I never encountered the word diverterish before, but it seems to derive from the Latin divertere, to deflect, akin to the English divert, because I always had one fear, that Russia would suddenly assault Romania in late autumn and would annex the petroleum sources. And we would have been not finished yet in late autumn 1940. If Russia had occupied the Romanian petroleum sources, Germany would have been lost with 60 Russian divisions. This thing could have been arranged. Back then, we had in Romania no task force yet. The Romanian government has only turned to us very lately. And what we had would have been ridiculous indeed. They only would have needed to occupy the petroleum sources. I could not have started a war in September or October anymore with our arms. That was indeed impossible. We also had the deployment of our troops in the east, not prepared in any way. The units had to be consolidated in the west first. The armament had to be brought in order, because naturally, we had also have made our sacrifices during the West campaign. It would have been impossible to line up before the spring of 1941, and if now the Russian, back then in the autumn of 1940, had occupied Romania and had annexed the petroleum sources, then we would have been helpless in the year 1941. We have the large German production, but the amount the Air Force alone is consuming, the amount our tank divisions are consuming, that is something quite monstrous. It is a consumption surpassing all imagination, and without the afflux of 4 to 5 million tons of Romanian petroleum, we would not be able to wage the war. And this worried me greatly, hence my attempt to overcome this time through negotiations, until we were strong enough to oppose this extortionate demands. The demands were sheer extortion. They were extortions. The Russians knew that we were helpless, that we were tied in the West. They could extort everything from us, and only on the visit of Molotov. Then I have offhandedly declared them that we could not accept the demands, these many demands. Basically, with this, the negotiations were abruptly ended. There were 4 points. The one point concerning Finland was the freedom to protect themselves from the Finnish threat. I said, "You do not want to tell me that Finland is threatening you." He said, "Well, in Finland, one would act against the friends of the Soviet Union. This would be a society. They would be continuously persecuted, and a great power could not accept being threatened from a small state regarding its existence." I said, your existence is not threatened by Finland, is it? You are not trying to tell me that your existence is threatened by Finland. Well, there also would be a moral threat to the existence of a great state, and what Finland was doing would be the more a threat to the moral existence. And I said to him that we would not be able to accept another war on the Baltic Sea as passive spectators. Then he asked me how our positions would be regarding Romania. We had made a guarantee after all, whether this guarantee would be directed against Russia as well. I said, I do not think that it is directed against you, because you do not have the intention to assault Romania, do you? Tell me, we never have heard that you have the intention to assault Romania. You have always stated that Bessarabia belonged to you, but you have never stated that you wanted to assault Romania. He said that he wanted to know precisely